what is that smell? I am definitely getting a hint of a deal. Oh wait, it's more than a hint. Yeah, these are the best deals, and not just this season, but all year long. In all seriousness, the smartest shoppers know that you get the brands you love with the most savings and cash back with Rakuten. And I know I'm certainly interested in sniffing out those deals. Start getting cash back at your favorite stores like Urban Outfitters, Petco, even Expedia, and getting cash back doesn't mean you have to miss out on sales because those can be stacked right on top. It's easy to use and based on a simple idea. Stores pay Rakuten for sending them shoppers, and Rakuten shares the money with you as cashback through PayPal or check. Smells like a perfect deal to me. Download the free Rakuten app and never miss a deal. Or go to Rakuten.com to start getting the most bang for your buck. That's Rakuten.
At T-Mobile, our critical mission is providing unparalleled 5G coverage for when connectivity is mission critical. Introducing T-Priority, America's best 5G network experience for first responders, even in times of congestion. More capacity, faster speeds, better coverage. T-Priority from T-Mobile, built for tomorrow's emergencies, ready today. Discover more at t-priority.com.
For qualifying organizations on eligible rate plans, coverage not available in some areas and may be impacted by emergencies.
Hey everyone, and welcome to Vulgar History, a feminist women's history comedy podcast. And this is a special bonus episode. You know, we're all going through it. We're all living through March of 2025. And so here's a nice thing for us all to enjoy together, which is an audio recording of an event that I just did last week. So as I was aggressively promoting on the podcast for the last couple of weeks, I went to Minneapolis to host an event for Allison Epstein, friend of the podcast's latest book, Fagin the Thief. And I brought along a little recorder device with me that I had been advised by Kate and Renata from Worst Bestsellers podcast, also friend of the podcast, who have recorded live events before, and they advised me this is how they did it. And so I brought this recorder with me, and I didn't know if it would work. And I'm so excited that it worked. So this is an audio recording of the event that Allison and I did at Majors and Quinn Bookstore in Minneapolis, which is like, heads up. Such a nice bookstore. It's huge. It's just an expansive bookstore. Actually, the day after the event, I went back just to browse around the store because it's such a nice place. Anyway, so I thought that you would all enjoy this discussion. Me and Allison, and at the end you hear some questions from the audience. I don't know how well you'll be able to hear them, but maybe pretty well. And you can for sure hear our answers to the questions. And there were about 20 people there, which was really exciting. And I think at least half of them were like Tits Out Brigade type people. And so it was really nice to meet everyone who Allison and I both met. Lana was one of the people in the audience as well, friend of the podcast, Lana Wood Johnson. It was just so nice for the three of us to, first of all, meet each other, because Lana and Allison and I had never met each other in person before. And then secondly, to meet a bunch of listeners at the event. It was so sweet. And then the next day I had the meetup where we met at a bowling alley. We had so much fun. I did terribly. You know what? I started off strong and then I got worse, but that was a nice hangout as well. I just could not have had a better time in Minneapolis meeting up with friends new and old. And so this is a recording of this fantastic event that Allison and I held, talking about Allison's new book, which everyone should read. I mean, everyone should read it, request it from your library. And if for some reason you don't have time to read it or you don't feel like reading it, then go to your local bookstore, take it off the shelf, flip to the back, look at the acknowledgements. And there'll be, if you're a member of the Tits Out Brigade, there'll be a really sweet surprise for you there and the acknowledgements towards the back of the book. Anyway, so here's a bonus episode, and enjoy this audio recording of a live event, my first ever live event that I've done. And I couldn't have been happier than to do it in service of Allison Epstein and their third book.
With the show tonight, you will hear from our authors. Then there will be time at the end of the program for audience questions with Ann Foster. After Q&A, please allow Allison to move to the signing counter, which is a glass display case you pass on your way into the store. You may line up there to say hello, get a signed copy of the book, and proceed to check out. If you do buy a book with us this evening, you're not only supporting the author, but also a locally owned independent bookstore, and we cannot thank you enough. And here is our guest today. Allison Epstein earned her MFA in fiction from Northwestern University and a BA in creative writing from the University of Michigan. A Michigan native, she now lives in Chicago. When not writing, she enjoys good theater, bad puns, and fancy jackets. She's the author of the historical novels A Tip for the Hangman and Let the Dead Bury the Dead. Ann Foster is a writer and a podcaster based out of Saskatoon. There's so many S's.
Honestly, it's close enough. It's fine.
Saskatoon.
Canada.
Yes, I love Canada. She has hosted the Vulgar History podcast since 2019. Her debut nonfiction book, Rebel of the Regency, is coming in 2026 from Hanover Square Press. Everybody, welcome.
Do you want to say something?
Well, thank you all for coming out on a truly terrible evening. It's so wonderful to see all of you here.
So I'm just here to support Allison, and I'm really excited for you. I'm excited to be here. I'm excited so many people are here, but also it's your third book, and we've been friends since before your first book was published. So it's really exciting to have watched your career progress to the point, it moved me in the beginning of your book. It just says, also by Allison Epstein. I'm like, oh my gosh, there's so many books. You're doing amazing, and we're here to celebrate your third book, Fagin the Thief. I think we're going to start with you doing a reading.
Yeah, can I borrow?
Yeah.
Thank you.
I just purchased it from here.
And it's a wonderful place to purchase it from. I was just going to read a little bit, sort of just set the scene from toward the beginning of the book. The novel Fagin the Thief kind of starts with Fagin as a child. It picks up when he's about 6. And so the scene I'm going to read from, he's 10 or 11 years old, and he's just encountered a very talented pickpocket on the streets of London, and he's decided, that is what I want to do with my life. I want you to teach me how you do that. And so the short scene I'm going to read is Fagin's first attempt at picking a pocket. Lesson number 1, Leftwich says, as he walks and Jacob jogs, is to avoid habit at all costs. You can double back to somewhere with rich pickings all you want, he says over his shoulder, but do it irregular-like. As soon as you're known as someone with a usual hunting ground, you'll get cut, either by the runners or by someone who wants the same pockets you're after. So stay light, stay on the move. Understood? Jacob nods, fighting to breathe through his nose. Stay on the move. He's panting by the time Leftwich slows his pace, in a part of town Jacob has never visited before. Farther west yet than Spitalfields, the neighborhood appears well-to-do to his untrained eyes, though not so fine that his own dirty clothing draws attention. A mix of shop girls and servants and merchants taking a stroll chatter in at least 3 languages. The air smells of wood and dust and sweat, strong but not unpleasant. Jacob suspects Leftwich selected the street on purpose, a betwixt-in-between place where poverty and riches brush elbows. Someday, he decides, he will have the same encyclopedic knowledge of the city and everyone in it. There now, Leftwich says. He doesn't point, but nods minutely toward a draper's shop, outside which the seller has arrayed a table with fine linens and handkerchiefs and cravats. An easy start, they've laid it all out like a banquet. Go and steal us one of those fancy wipes, eh? Jacob stares. Show me how you do it, it said, not let me get myself arrested. How? How? The thief scoffs. How? He asks me. You either have the touch of it or you don't, Fagin, and there's only one way to tell. Do it, and we'll see. A smart person would turn away, understand this to be a sure path to Bridewell, and find another way to make his name. But Jacob takes a breath, then nods. Look alive, then, he thinks. As he did when trailing Leftwich, he weaves through the crowd, keeping to other people's shadows. Taking care not to jostle anyone, he must move slowly, but gradually he approaches the draper's table at an oblique angle. How did Leftwich do it at the Haymarket? It seemed so easy from a distance. Jacob would give anything for one more opportunity to observe. He would like to sketch diagrams, take measurements, plan his first stuff like a tailor laying out pieces for a fine gown. But this, it seems, is a skill he must learn by doing. He falls into the wake of a woman with petticoats wide enough to nearly hide him from sight. There, safely concealed, he toys one final time with the idea of running away. No one would know. It would be as if nothing ever happened. Leftwich would chuckle at his failure and feel superior for 10 minutes, and then even he would forget the whole episode. He grits his teeth and clenches his fists. His bare knuckles ache, his dirty palms pierced by his own nails. These hands are all he has, but they will have to do. They are nearly past the shop when the woman pauses, eyeing a bolt of fabric at the far end of the table. How much? She asks the shopkeeper, pointing. 3 shillings the yard, the shopkeeper says. As fair a price as you'll find anywhere. It isn't, but the goods have her attention. No one is looking at him now. Fast as lightning, Jacob darts out a hand toward the opposite side of the table and crushes the nearest handkerchief in his palm. The silk against his skin feels like the finest thing he's ever touched. The woman is still asking about the quality of the fabric. Triumph. It is intoxicating. He can barely contain himself as he walks easily from the table, hands in his pockets, clutching his prize. He is a natural. His first time, no instruction, and he managed it right under the shopkeeper's nose. Gold, jewelry, food, money, fine clothes, all of it parades before his mind's eye, a dancing troupe of ghostly objects made animate by his own skill. He will have them. He will have everything. And he's nearly out of sight, too, before the cry goes up. Thief! Somebody stop that boy. Jacob takes off running.
So, Allison, your book, Fagin the Thief, is a retelling of, or a reimagining of a character from the book Oliver Twist by Charles Dickens. Do you remember when you first encountered the character?
I do. I was 7 or 8 years old myself, and I was listening to the cassette tape that my grandmother had of Oliver the Musical, the 1994 Broadway cast. And I fell in love with the character of Fagin.
The songs are so good.
They're so good.
They're the best songs in that show.
That's exactly. He's immediately he's going to steal the show the second he comes on stage. He's the weird crime uncle everyone wishes they had in that show. And so I eventually went and saw a production, and seeing it in person, I was just fascinated by that character. That was like electric to me. And then, eventually 10 years or so later, I thought, I wonder what the book is like. I really enjoyed that show. Let me pick up the Dickens novel and see if it's any good. And the experience of encountering Fagin the way Dickens wrote him is a very different experience than the way that the show portrays him. And I kind of felt a little bit betrayed by experiencing it in the novel that way. I mean, it's such a nothing of a character the way that Dickens writes it. It's just a villain there to be an anti-Semitic caricature of a evil person who kind of comes out of the shadows and has no real personality other than to be a problem for everyone around him. But I don't know if it was because I had already fallen in love with the stage musical, or I think there's something in Dickens's character at the same time that I still kind of loved, that he's been a problematic fave for me even so ever since. And so I was just like, I wish someone would give him a chance to stand up. Yeah.
So no one else has until now. Like, how did you think, when did you realize it was going to be you to write this book?
I was checking Publishers Marketplace every day for a year, waiting for someone else to write.
That's such a good idea.
Because I was sure someone was going to beat me to it.
Yeah.
I started it, it's 2021 maybe, so I've been kicking it around for a while, and as the draft was coming together, literally every morning I was like, okay, who sold the book about Fagin? Because someone's going to do it. But fortunately, I finished it first before anybody did. So.
Yeah. Well, and I think it fits so beautifully in with kind of this genre that's been around for a while, but sort of emerging recently, like James or Percival Everett, like taking a character who's like problematic from a classic quote unquote novel and just kind of giving them more depth and more meaning and looking at what was life like for these kind of people living on the margins of society in these eras. And how does the whole story change when you kind of reorient it around that person? So what was it like when you were like, okay, I'm going to write this book. Hopefully no one else does. Like, how do you dive into that world of, we'll talk about the Dickens a bit in a second, but like of living as like a Jewish person in London in this era, like what kind of research is there for you to even do about that from Chicago?
But from Chicago, not taking myself in a time machine and also to London.
Yeah.
There's quite a bit of research about sort of the European Jewish experience in the 19th century. And so I started just kind of like the way I always do research is I pick up the biggest, broadest book that I can find. And this one was like The Jews of Europe. Yeah. And I'm like, okay, that's a starting place. And so I would kind of get like a lay of the land of where I've had it. But being able to focus it in on England was a really interesting research project to me, because most of what I knew about kind of the European Jewish experience was like Eastern Europe, Soviet, Russia, Poland, like that kind of era. That's a very different kind of experience. That was a very, like, the ruling party of those countries was actively passing laws and enacting violence against Jewish communities. And England wasn't necessarily like that in the 19th century.
Was England like a place where people fled to from those places?
To some, yeah, there was, London was sort of an immigration community. And so in Fagin the Thief, his family are immigrants who come to London from more of an Eastern European place. There had been a Jewish community in England for a while until, I want to say, the 1200s, when one of the Edwards was like expelled all of the Jews from England, because every country in Europe has expelled all of the Jews at some point. But yeah, the particular context of that 19th century English Jewish experience was odd, because there were highly placed, successful Jewish people in London at that time. There were Jewish members of parliament at that time, but there was still sort of an undercurrent of, we've expelled this community from our country before, and we could do it again. They're still not really part of the fabric of this country.
And so when you're researching, so you've got the Jewish history that you're looking at, and then another part of that would just be London and like the slums that you're writing about. So how did you go about? Because if for people who haven't read the book yet, like you're getting into like detail, like granular detail about like street names and like what it was like, and this is around the corner from this, like how, and well, there's like the poverty map, right?
Yeah.
Explain that.
Yes. This was one of my favorite research tools in this book. Was the Victorians will make a map of anything, and so one of the best maps that I found was every kind of street corner and intersection in London that was coded by how often law enforcement would have to visit, and what the average income of the people who lived there was. And so you could kind of really cross-reference, these are the parts of the city that are dangerous and that are really strapped for resources. And then you go, 6 blocks this way, and this is where the extremely wealthy people would live. And it was just really brought the city to life to me in a way. Mm-hmm. But there were all kinds of resources like that. The Victorians wrote about everything, and they documented everything. So if I had a question about, what did this particular building look like, someone had written an article about it at some point. So
that's what I love about English history. There's so many people, whatever you want to research, someone's written a book about it.
Someone has.
They love research. They love writing about their own history.
They do. They love, and Dickens himself loved looking at things and writing about them.
Okay, so Dickens, so just to sort of like put this all together, you've got the Jewish history, you've got like the poverty map, the London history, and then you have to look at, presumably, Oliver Twist, like line by line, to like look at what are the events, because how much of those were like cornerstones for your book of things that had to happen and you had to work around?
Yeah. I must have read Oliver Twist a dozen times, which
God bless you.
I was, at least it's one of the shorter Dickenses, which is nice. But yeah, I really quickly getting into that had to decide, okay, if this is no longer the story of a child named Oliver Twist, this is the story of Fagin. He is in maybe half of the book. So the other half of the book already, I can kind of decide this is not relevant to me. But of what I have, what are the kind of the tentpole scenes that I want to make sure I'm writing to? What do I want to make sure I'm keeping from the original? And what, if anything, is not going to fit in the way that I'm telling it? And I kind of challenged myself from the beginning to change the least amount as possible. Just kind of as partly as a challenge to myself, but because it, like, Dickens gives you so much in the original of the world that these characters live in, but he doesn't build them out, really. He's not interested in creating sort of a fully rounded person. He's writing in, this is a good character and this is a bad character. And so the challenge that I set myself kind of was, can I work with what he gave me in that box and see what would happen if we weren't working with stock figures anymore. What would a real person do in this frame?
So it's sort of like taking that scene and just turning the camera lens, like if it's a movie. And once the other people leave the room, Fagin is still in the room. And what does he do next? Or like, what was he doing before? Was there anything, I don't want to get into spoilers. I mean, spoilers for Oliver Twist, a book that is gazillion years old. Was there anything that Fagin did, like you're talking about he's the anti-Semitic stereotype. Was there anything that he did in the book that you were just like, I can't have this in my book. This is too gross.
Yeah, there were two things. And one of them I just said, I'm not doing that. And that was one of the scenes when Oliver first meets Fagin. It's his first night in Fagin's house and he is sleeping badly and sees Fagin get up and kind of creep through the moonlight to like pull up a floorboard, and he takes out a giant box full of diamonds and counts them. I'm like, we're not doing that. That's ridiculous. So I threw that out. But the part that I was interested in playing with is the way that Dickens shows Fagin is he's kind of a collector of children. Like he goes out and finds these vulnerable orphans and teaches them to steal and uses them for his own purposes. And you can't write the story of Fagin without figuring out what's his relationship with these kids like. And I didn't want it to be purely like predatory for profit, right? That didn't feel honest to me, and it didn't feel interesting either. That's what a villain you draw in Sharpie in 3 seconds would do. So I wanted to think, okay, this is a person who's bringing in these children and teaching them to break the law. Okay, not ideal. But why would somebody do that? Why is that happening? And I had to kind of play around with his motives without super changing what actually happens.
Yeah. It just seems like such a challenge to take the book and then build up, like we were talking about, like just kind of like, what was he thinking about? So part of that involves giving him a first name.
Yeah.
Part of that involves giving him a family background. How did you kind of develop his family?
Yeah, that was what frustrated me the most about Oliver Twist is Fagin just appears. He has no first name, no background, no nothing. He has no community. He is the Jew, singular, standing by himself. And there's a throwaway line in the novel, but I think Bill Sykes says, did you have any parents at all, or did you just come straight from the devil? And like, clearly what Dickens is implying is, no, he just came straight from the devil. This is a creature. This is not a person.
Yeah.
So I knew by the time we meet Fagin and Oliver Twist, he's alone. But I didn't think he would start out that way. So I wanted to kind of turn the clock back and think, what would a community for him have looked like, and what would have happened for him to lose that? And so his relationship with his mother kind of came out for me as a kind of a cornerstone for where he started. That was the one relationship that he had as a child to hold on to. The other relationship that was interesting to me was him and his father. And in the way that I've written it, his father was hanged as a thief before Jacob was born, so they never met. But there's this presence of kind of his father's path through life that goes through the whole book. This is a person he didn't know, but it's sort of a fate that's chasing him.
Well, and that's sort of, you brought it up, so I don't want to be like spoilers, but like there are ghostly presences in this book.
I love a ghost.
Is there any of that in Oliver Twist, or that's like you, like this is really your book? Because I don't want to always just be comparing it to Oliver Twist, but like this is the story. That was the like basis, the inspiration, but then you made it a book and part of your book because it's you.
Yeah.
Is ghostly presences.
Yeah, there are no actual ghosts in Oliver Twist. There's one chapter where Fagin and Oliver's half-brother think they see a ghost, and I saw that and I was like, that's where the ghost
canon.
Yeah, but I figured Dickens would be okay with it. He wrote enough ghosts.
Yeah,
so.
Fair. No, exactly. And actually, speaking of Dickens, what are your thoughts of Charles Dickens and how he wrote not just Fagin but other Jewish characters?
Oh, what are my thoughts on how long do you have for me to talk about?
I don't know.
Okay, well, we're not going to do that for 20 minutes.
Okay.
I promise. But I think we have a tendency as a reading public to think, oh, well, it was the biases at the time. This is just how people believed back then. And we kind of excuse it as, it's fine. It was a different time. They didn't know any better. But what I like about Dickens's experience writing Jewish characters is that at the time, some people did know better, and they told him. He got letters from readers after he published Oliver Twist, not a lot, but enough, saying, Charles Dickens, you stood up as this hero of the poor and oppressed in London. You wrote these novels trying to get people to enact social change, and then you wrote this. And how do you reconcile that? How do you see, do you not see what you're doing to your only Jewish character and how that's counter to what you're trying to do? And he stewed on that for a decade before he tried to write another Jewish character, and he did. He wrote the character of Raya in Our Mutual Friend, which is the only other Jewish character, and that character is commonly read as his apology for Fagin. It's just a very kind, self-sacrificing, lovely man who's never said a mean word to anybody in his life, and he sacrifices everything for the girl he's trying to help. And I hate that character so much. He's so boring, and he lets every Christian character in that book call him the worst names you've ever heard, and he just takes it all and never stands up for himself. And so while I think Dickens did see maybe what I did the first time was not great, and he tried to learn, I still like Fagin better, personally.
Yeah.
I think he's more interesting and had more potential for a story that I wanted to read than this kind of idealized nothing of a character.
Yeah. Well, and I think that is part of what's really interesting about your book. And I've seen you describe it this way as well, that there's kind of no good people, like everyone is kind of a dirtbag, brackets, not always positive, often negative. So what was it like to write a book? To write a book and then also to present it to your agent and to your editor to be like, hey, here's this book full of terrible people. They're all terrible. What was the response like?
Yeah. I had a very patient publishing team who saw what I was trying to do, fortunately, and they were cautious about it. And in revisions, they did have me, my editor gave me the best note while I was revising the character of Bill Sikes. She said, I know you love him, but someone else has to know why you love him. He has to have something nice about him. Otherwise, you're going to seem like a sociopath. So I didn't want to overly sanitize any of them. Like you said, there are no heroes in this book. This is not we flip the camera and now Fagin is the good guy hero going out to save the world. It's not that. But they are people who are making sometimes terrible decisions, but for reasons that hopefully the reader can understand and empathize with. And in some ways, I find dirtbags to be the most interesting people. And so I wanted to tell stories about characters who are making bad decisions and making their lives more difficult, but for reasons that we can follow because they believe they're doing the best they can with what they have.
Exactly. Reading a book, for people who haven't read it yet, it's not just a bunch of horrible people being horrible for no reason. No, they're sympathetic, even if you don't agree with what their ultimate decisions are. It's well, I see why he did that, but it's kind of it's too
I wish you wouldn't.
Yeah. But that's kind of too bad. I was, I don't know if I've ever read Oliver Twist, but I know that I've seen Oliver the musical. And so I was reading through it. I didn't want to remind myself of the plot of Oliver Twist because I wanted to experience the plot just through your book. And so I was like, oh, that's right. And then characters come in who I remember from the musical. So Nancy, I'm like, oh God, Nancy. I remember.
It's the correct response.
Yeah.
Nancy, yeah.
She has that stuff. She has a really sad song, Bill Sikes.
Yeah.
But then also when I was reading the book, I was like, wait a minute. I think I'm noticing some lyrics from musical Oliver. And then I thought, no, not necessarily. Maybe those are words from the book, and then they're turned into the musical, and Allison's reusing text from the book. So, someone says, that's your funeral. When Bill Sikes comes in, he's like, remember my name? I'm like, that's a song. I remember that song.
It is.
And then it mentions Nancy was at a pub, and she was singing a song, sitting at a table, and everyone sang along. I'm like, that's Papa. I know the song she was singing. Allison, in front of witnesses. Did you quote Oliver the musical in your book?
Yes. I'm not ashamed. I tell people, I've told a lot of people I'm writing an Oliver Twist retelling, and they're all like, oh God, do I have to go out and read Oliver Twist? And you don't. I wanted this book to be able to stand whether you have background in that novel, whether you've read Dickens and love Dickens, I wanted to have something to offer to those readers, but I also wanted it to be accessible and interesting for people who saw the musical one time in elementary school, or saw Oliver and Company, the Disney movie with the dogs and the Billy Joel music. That's also fine.
Yeah.
It's just like, it is a story that stands on its own. And I think the characters that Dickens created are interesting enough that they can stand on their own without needing to soak through all of the Dickens of it all.
I'm just glad I recognize the song lyrics.
And I'm very proud of it.
Thank you. There's also some sequences, if anyone's familiar with the movie Newsies, which was about newsboys. And there's some scenes in here with Fagin's like youth, the young men who's trained to be thieves, sort of hanging out, young boys smoking cigars. And I was like, this makes me think of Newsies. Allison, Newsies?
I gotta tell you, any like 10 to 14-year-old boys standing around causing mischief, that is inspired by Newsies always, because that's a perfect film.
Yeah. No, so it's fun to I was proud of myself. I don't always I don't know other authors as well as I know you, but I was just like, I think I might know this inspiration might for you.
And this is why you're a dangerous reader.
But those are the Easter eggs for everybody else to enjoy.
Yes.
But I was wondering about the role of the female characters in this. So I know from the musical, Nancy and Bet are in that, and they're in this book as well. And so it was like looking at their characters and trying to revisit them, not as just like, oh God, poor Nancy, but it's like, who is she as a person?
Yeah, I came into this project knowing, okay, Fagin was done dirty by the original, and I want to figure out what that actual person would be like. Nancy was the other one that I wanted to figure out. And again, Dickens actually also got pushed back for the way that he portrayed Nancy in his original novel. And for those who haven't experienced the novel recently, Nancy has one character trait, and it's, I love Bill, and I will put up with absolutely anything that he does to me because I love him. She is a suffering, battered woman who doesn't really have any agency outside of that relationship. And when Dickens was questioned on that, he really did double down on it and say, sometimes this is how it is. This is what, sometimes women in abusive relationships are like this. And that frustrated me in that response, because I've always felt that his treatment of Nancy is not patronizing exactly, but I didn't feel like he was asking the right questions of her. Dickens was asking the question, how much will she put up with, and how strong is she, and how much can she suffer? And I wanted to ask the question, why is she there? Why is she with Bill, and why does she stay with him? And the more time I spent with her, it felt like there had to be something there at the beginning of their relationship that was worth staying for even after it got bad. And it does get bad, but it seemed wrong to me to start it there and say, she's choosing to suffer because she doesn't think she deserves to be happy. That didn't feel right.
I want to just clarify for everybody too that like in your book, we meet Nancy before Nancy meets Bill. So we see who she is as a person before she comes into this relationship. So you, and I assume like on purpose.
Yeah.
To kind of show who she is. So she's not only defined by that relationship.
Right. She exists outside of it, but it is important to her life. And so I wanted to show, what does a relationship like that look like for a person like her in a more nuanced way than just, she'll
Yeah. And now for a quick advertising break.
There are many ways to entice a potential new customer with flashy branding and calculated marketing strategies. But at the end of the day, the success of a business comes down to the ability to close the sale. And for businesses like Thrive Cosmetics, Allbirds, or Skims, it's what goes on behind the scenes, making selling, and for shoppers, buying, simple, that makes the difference. For them and for millions of businesses, that difference is made with Shopify. Businesses that want to grow with Shopify. Because if your goal is growth, your commerce platform better be ready to sell wherever your customers are scrolling or strolling. And Shopify will make sure you're ready. On the web, in your store, in their feed, and everywhere in between. Nobody does selling better than Shopify. And with Shop Pay, they boost conversions up to 50%, meaning way less carts going abandoned and way more sales going. It's no wonder Shopify is home of the #1 checkout on the planet. Upgrade your business and get the same checkout Allbirds uses. Sign up for your $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/realm, all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/realm to upgrade your selling today. That's shopify.com/realm. I'm someone who genuinely does enjoy cooking. Until it's 6 p.m. on a Thursday, I'm tired and I just cannot muster the energy to make a full meal that I'm so desperately craving. In the past, that exact scenario would usually lead me to order out, spending way too much money for food that ultimately didn't leave me feeling great. Now though, I am so happy to have a better option with Factor, and their delicious, healthy meals are ready in even less time than it'd take to order takeout. Factor has chef-made gourmet meals that make eating well easy. Their meals are dietitian approved and are ready to heat and eat in 2 minutes. These aren't some sad frozen meals either. They all arrive fresh and fully prepared, and I genuinely look forward to my box each week. I had never really been a fan of cauliflower rice, but it was in one of my meals last week with queso fundido and ground beef, and safe to say I've changed my tune on that one. They have 40 options across 8 dietary preferences on the menu each week, and you can choose from preferences like protein plus, carb conscious, and fiber filled, so it's easy to pick meals tailored to your goals. Beyond their meals, I've also really enjoyed Factor's cold pressed juices, and they've got plenty of add-ons like wholesome smoothies, breakfasts, and grab-and-go snacks, so I'm very excited to try those in my upcoming boxes as well, because my less than nutritious snacking habits are next on my list to tackle. If you're looking for convenient ways to optimize your nutrition this year, eat smart with Factor. Get started with factormeals.com/factorpodcast and use code FACTORPODCAST to get 50% off your first box plus free shipping. That's code FACTORPODCAST at factormeals.com/factorpodcast to get 50% off plus free shipping on your first box. When I was younger, I would help my little sister do her makeup for dance competitions. And while I enjoyed spending that time with her, learning about the different techniques needed to achieve the look, there were pretty strict guidelines for the stage makeup, and not much room for self-expression. I was reminded of those moments recently when I was helping one of my best friends get ready for a party. As a trans woman who came out later in life, she didn't grow up playing with makeup like I had, and we had so much fun picking just the right purples and eye glitter to match her outfit for the evening. What made us both feel beautiful that night wasn't just about the makeup, but how we were committing to showing up as ourselves and encouraging each other to do the same. That's the commitment that Thrive Cosmetics also knows well, with over 10 years of celebrating the strength and beauty of women. And they don't just talk the talk. For every product purchased, Thrive Cosmetics donates products and funds to support important causes, including domestic abuse survivors, veterans, homelessness, and LGBTQ+ communities. I feel proud getting my favorite makeup products from them, knowing that it also positively impacts people and communities I care about. And they really do carry my favorite makeup products. One that I can't get enough of is the Liquid Lash Extensions Mascara. It's the best mascara I've ever used. It doesn't clump or smudge, and my eyelashes always look dramatically longer thanks to their flake-free tubing formula. Plus, like all of Thrive Cosmetics beauty products, it's certified 100% vegan, cruelty-free, and made with clean, skin-loving ingredients. So whether it's for yourself, a sister, a friend, celebrate the women in your life with Thrive Cosmetics, luxury beauty that gives back. Right now, you can get an exclusive 20% off your first order at thrivecosmetics.com/thrive. That's Thrive Cosmetics, CAUSEMETICS.com/thrive for 20% off your first order.
This episode is brought to you by Peacock. The new Peacock original documentary, Matthew Perry, A Hollywood Tragedy, dives deep into the beloved actor's rise to fame and his tragic death. 5 people, including Perry's personal assistant, 2 medical doctors, and an alleged Hollywood drug dealer known as the Ketamine Queen, were charged with conspiracy to illegally provide Perry with the ketamine. Explore the details of the case in this heartbreaking special, streaming now only on Peacock.
And we're back.
Well, which brings up Bill Sykes as well as a character. I just remember from the musical as just being kind of like, oh God, this guy.
Yeah. That's also a correct response to Bill.
Yeah. No, so I thought really interesting because he first introduced him as like a younger person.
Yeah.
And I think it's funny. I don't think it's a spoiler to say it. Like, Fagin asked him, how old are you? 13? And he thinks that he's underestimating it. And how are you, 15? He's like, oh no, I'm 13. Like,
Exactly.
he looks like a 25-year-old man at 13. Like, he's just this, he kind of, you say something like, he was never meant to be a child. Like, this was a human being who was never really a child.
Yeah.
So what's that like to write somebody who's that damaged, I guess?
Yeah.
Who you love, clearly.
Problematically so, yeah.
Yeah.
Bill is a mess, and I didn't expect to care about him as much as I did by the end of this project, because, I mean, in every adaptation, Bill Sikes has no redeeming qualities. Bill Sikes is toxic masculinity personified in a frightening figure, and that was not something that was immediately interesting or sympathetic to me. But as I was trying to figure out Fagin and I was trying to figure out Nancy, Bill is such a big part of their lives. He shapes like the whole world that they're in. And in order to understand why they're with him, I had to understand who he was. And he's the one with the most danger in him, and he was really difficult to figure out. But the more time I spent with him, he is making every wrong decision you can make. He is the definition of hurt people. And like, that's not to excuse anything that he does in the novel, but it made sense to me that he was so frightened of not being strong enough to protect himself that he became this powerful figure of violence, because if you're stronger than everyone around you, you can't be hurt.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
There's a scene in the book as well, and this is back to Fagin, where he has like the jacket full of little jangly things to like train people how to steal without making the things jangle.
Yeah.
Is that an Oliver Twist, or is that just a musical?
It's an Oliver Twist, and it's also a real thing that real thieves actually did.
Yes, I want to talk to you about. There's so much information in this book. It's like a real how-to guide to be a pickpocket in 1830s London.
Yes.
So like you learn things like that.
Yeah.
How did you learn about all the specific things you have? Like, it's very, I'm like, oh, that's how that works. Okay.
Yeah. Once again, those wacky Victorians and their books for everything. I read, it's called London Labor and the London Poor by Henry Mayhew, which is like not a page turner, but it's like 500 to 700 pages about how every class in London would kind of go through the day and make a living. And there's a whole section of it that's the criminal classes of London. And so this guy, Henry Mayhew, went out into London in the 1850s, 1860s.
Some people just told him what they did?
Yeah, he was just like, I'm a journalist and I'm writing a book about how people do crime. Can you tell me how you do crime? And there's
Sure, I can.
And they sure did, because you could talk to anybody.
Yeah.
So there are just pages and pages about here's how an adult thief would train a child thief. This is like, they'll do the game with the coat, and you'll put the handkerchief in the coat pocket and see if the kids can come in and catch it. And there's pages and pages about how you would rob somebody on a bus in 1850s London. So if anyone ever wants to learn how to do that, now I know how to do that.
Did you try?
I didn't try because I'm not coordinated enough to do it, but in theory I could do it.
And also you have a lot of details. I think it's the same writer wrote a book about prisons.
Yes.
So there's a lot of specifics. There's so much specifics. It's a really readable book. It's not just like fact.
You're really selling this.
No, but there's so many parts in it. I'm just like, wow, there's so much. I'm like, and I know that you do the research. So I'm like, I'm sure this is true. There's a part where like someone's coming out of jail and they're like, well, I know that they're usually let out of jail at 7 p.m., but there's so much paperwork that don't come out till 10 p.m. I'm just like, all this information, like about jails, like it was the same sort of thing, right?
It was the same sort of thing, and that one was the same guy. Because after I finished reading his giant book with every fact I ever wanted to know, I was like, I wonder what else this guy did. As I looked him up on Google Books, and his other one was a 900-page book about all of the prisons in London. It's like, this guy is crazy. So I should have dedicated this book to Henry Mayhew. Wonderful man.
Thank you. He would never know.
Oh, I think he'd be thrilled.
Can you set the scene also for everybody? Because I was confused, not by you, but just by myself, by not really knowing a lot about Oliver Twist.
Uh-huh.
I thought that this story took place like later in the 1800s, but the time period of your book, like the events of Oliver Twist, it's like what, 1830 or something like that?
Yeah, I chose to set my book in the year Oliver Twist was published, which was 1838. That's when the serialization in the newspapers finished. And so that I decided that's when the events of Oliver Twist happen. And so in that kind of timeline, my Fagin is in his 50s. And so I wanted to then kind of turn the clock back to follow his whole life. So the book starts in 1830, but then kind of goes back into the 1780s and 90s and works its way up.
And how different were things? I mean, from then, like the 1790s to the 1830s, like what Fagin's experience, like in your research as well, it's like, well, this is what prisons were like, this is what these were like, but like 25 years later, maybe it was different. Like, how were you able to show that passage of time?
It's a funny question, because in the grand scheme of, English history between the 1770s and 80s and the 1830s, enormous change, like the American Revolution and the entire Regency period and all of that.
Industrialization.
The Industrial Revolution is just starting at that point. Yeah, but what was interesting was looking at the story of the poor in London at that time. Didn't change all that much. The big kind of societal changes that are happening and the, revolution sweeping across Europe, that's one thing. But I still don't have enough money to make it to my next meal. That was kind of a constant through this. And it would, progressively get worse as the entire Industrial Revolution would happen. But it was kind of a funny feeling as I was researching the time period. I had to keep reminding myself, oh yeah, this is when Bridgerton was happening, and this is a completely different world. But it is, this is happening at the same time. This is Jane Austen's England, but it's not at all really.
So it's so interesting just to think, for the poor, effectively it wasn't that different, whether it's 1790 or 1830.
Right. We went through in this book, I think it's 3 kings and a queen, and I don't think any of the characters in my book particularly notice or care.
Yeah, which I appreciate. Because one of those kings was my least favorite, George IV. But who do insult slightly in the book, and I appreciate that.
You're welcome.
So in terms of, what was I going to say? So you're looking at, in the book, this time period, what he was doing, training these young thieves, he finds sort of a business for himself of getting these young people, and they would steal things and that would help him get money. How would you see Fagin working in today's society? What grift do you think he would be up to?
Yeah, I've thought about this, and I think there are 2 paths that a 2025 Jacob Fagin would follow, and there's one that is the legal path. And I was thinking, what would he do if he actually had to get a job today? What would he be good at? And I decided 2nd grade public school teacher. Yes. I think it'd be incredible.
Oh, with the kids.
And he would be in trouble with the administration every single day of his life.
Yeah.
But they would love him.
Yeah.
Is the path I saw. And then there was if we weren't happy side of the law, what grift would he get up to? And I was thinking, multi-level marketing schemes seems likely.
Yeah.
I think A, he'd be a great salesperson, and B, you can immediately recruit other people to go out and recruit other people, and he'd be great at that too.
Yeah. Well, because part of his whole deal was just the charisma that he had. He wouldn't have been able to have as much success as he had as a thief, as this sort of father figure to these people sort of mentoring, if he hadn't been magnetic in some way. To get people wouldn't work for him if he didn't have some sort of charisma. So I feel yeah, I could see him online.
Selling supplements door to door, I don't know.
Or something like that, for sure. Yeah. What has the response been like from, you've done a couple of events so far. You've talked to some people who've read the book.
Yeah.
Besides me.
I have talked to you about it a lot, but I have also talked to other people.
Yeah. So what sorts of things have people, is there anything surprising you, what people are finding in the book or saying about it?
I've been really relieved to hear how people who are big fans of Dickens have responded to it. Because I thought it would be an interesting story for historical fiction people who aren't necessarily very big Dickens fans, because the Victorian era is a big pull for readers, and so I thought, okay, I'll get some of those people, but people who like Dickens really, really like Dickens, and so I wanted to present the world in a way that felt respectful to Dickens, but also challenging it, and that was a really tough line to walk, and I've been pleasantly surprised by Dickens fans who have told me that they did enjoy it. And that I hadn't I was very worried. So I'm a little bit relieved. But.
Well, because you think you really looked at the book to be what's in the text and to use that. You're not changing anything major, comma,
Yeah.
Spoilers.
It's the comma and concern. Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it just has to do with some stuff that Dickens put in the book about like what was the actual sentence for this actual crime. And
yeah, or like now that I've put so much of myself into these characters that it sort of evolved the way that I think they would behave in certain situations that Dickens wrote. Like there are some scenes in the original that I had to kind of recast in my version just because now that I've spent so much time building out a motivation and a backstory for this character, I don't think they would behave the way that Dickens has them behave. They would do something different. It didn't feel accurate anymore for them to behave that way.
Can I talk about Oliver Twist in that context?
Yes.
That little kid.
Uh-huh.
What is your take on your Oliver Twist in this book, as seen through Fagin's eyes, is different from the like pure-hearted little angel of the musical, for instance?
Yeah. I've described my Oliver Twist as a kid who would stab you through the eye for a quarter, which I personally think is, number one, a little bit more interesting, and two, probably more accurate to the kind of child that he would have had to be in the story that Dickens is telling, because that kid is on his own at the age of 6 or 7. And I mean, Dickens shows him surviving through a workhouse and then running away to London, which was like 50-mile walk by himself, and then making his own life. And I don't think you get that kind of survival instinct without, you know, being willing to stand up for yourself and do what you have to do to get by. And so I wanted to show that side of him for the amount that Oliver is in this book. He's not in it a whole lot. It's not his story anymore, but I did want to show him sort of in what I felt was a more human and probable kind of way.
Well, I mean, the same as with Fagin and with Nancy and Bill Sykes. It's just like, make this a human, right? How would they behave instead of making it like this right from the devil or this like Oliver's kind of like this angel. It's like, well, if you're not writing an allegory, if you're writing about like messy, real poor people who have to survive.
Right. And I think it's worth saying that like what I'm doing is not what Dickens was doing. He was writing a different kind of book. I've described it as sort of like it's like a fairy tale, right? You have your hero, your little child who goes off into the big bad world and meets villain 1 and villain 2, and the villains get what's coming to them and the kid gets his happily ever after. And as far as that goes, you know, Oliver Twist is a success in that way. But if it was trying to be realism from a character perspective, it's not trying to do that, and so it doesn't do that.
Yeah, well, I mean, that just makes me think of things like movies, like Wicked, for instance, where it's just like taking like this, what if that wasn't the villain? What would make that person do those things? So I think your book fits in that pantheon also, just taking like a classic villain. There's even books like this for teenagers and for children that are like, what if Maleficent or the Evil Queen or Gaston? And like, well, why did Gaston do that? You know, so it's a classic thing that people think about a lot of stories, I think.
Yeah, I've never read one about Gaston.
Oh, there is one about Gaston.
Is there?
It's probably here.
Okay.
I forget what it's called. No, it's definitely in this series. I think it's probably around time that we can take some questions from people. If people, I hope you have questions, because I've run out of questions.
I have one. Yeah. So I'm curious what it's like emotionally, like the emotional fallout of living with a character or with the research project for such a long time. It's you said it's been in the works, you know, in your head even longer than what the 4 years of actually getting this book to production. What is that like? Like, how do you come down from that? And are you even given a chance to sort of emotionally recuperate before having to launch into the next project?
Yeah. I'm currently coming down from that. So it's strangely for this book, it's been really nice to kind of send it out into the world because I've just wanted to talk about it with people for so long. And before the book is out, it's very hard to find someone who wants to talk to you about Fagin for 3 hours. So it's been fun to have other people who have kind of sat with it to some extent and hear what other people are feeling and thinking about it. There is a deep terror that comes with that too. Here's everything I've thought about for years. I hope you like it. And if you don't, okay.
Well, it's very vulnerable, right?
Yeah. But fortunately, it's been a really good experience so far. And I've also been able to kind of sit in that moment for a little bit to just talk about this book and not worry quite yet about what's next or what am I working on. I'm having the moment for this. And after that, I'll be able to think about what comes after.
I read the book. Yeah, I got borrowed the day it came out, and I think he did a masterful job on it.
Oh, thank
He
you.
covered all my questions. that probably was going to be the most boring question you will get in all your course.
Well, that's a challenge now in the site.
It has to do with font. It has to
I'm
do-
so happy you have a font question.
Because, first of all, in your dirt bag, you mentioned the drop caps.
Yes.
So that got my curiosity up. And then when I was reading the book, and then I noticed that just before the chapter, the section breaks, there's a little change in the font.
Yes.
And I was trying to figure out why. One of them is the letter that the mom writes, and then the others I just couldn't figure out. And I know everything is done for a purpose.
Yes.
This one isn't just arbitrary. So, I hope I don't want to be giving anything away. But
No.
why?
Yeah. The last chapter in each section is told from a different point of view. Every other chapter is focused close in on Fagin, and those two branch, the letter, and then the other two branch out into other characters' points of view. And so they get slightly different fonts for a slightly different framing. Yeah.
I go back and look.
Yeah.
I thought of that, and I didn't pick up. I'll go back and look. Thank you. By the way, I look, again, I thought your questions were great. I thought you navigated all of those pitfalls you could have fallen into. Handling Fagin and doing the character. I thought you handled that just beautiful.
Thank you so much.
All right, I read all your books. I'm a dirtbag. I love your writing.
Thank you so
Good
much.
to see you in person.
Wonderful to
Your
see you.
persona is not like I would thought it would be.
Listen to
This is exactly what it's like. Yeah, I haven't heard the podcast.
she's a.
Yes. Friend of the pod.
Can we talk about font a bit more?
Please.
Because there's a thing at the beginning of every chapter where there's like one big letter.
My drop caps. Yeah.
Yeah. So is that did Charles Dickens do that? Like, why did you choose to do that? I assume that was your choice.
It wasn't, and it was a delightful surprise. Because I love fonts, as apparently a lot of you already know. It's one of the best parts about publishing is that you get to see it laid out in fonts like a real book, and that's exciting every time. But they chose to do sort of those big feature letters in the beginning just for style, and it reminds me of an old-timey illuminated manuscript, and it just makes me happy every time I look at it.
So it was a happy surprise.
Yes, it was.
You were like, I need drop caps.
No, the only thing I asked when we sent the final manuscript to production, they said, "Do you want anything?" I was like, yes, but like, what do you want me to ask for? And I asked, there are like 3 very small newspaper articles in the book, and I asked, can I have a newspaper font? And I felt really nervous to ask because I thought they would tell me no, I was getting too extravagant. And then I remembered this is a digital publishing. They don't have to switch the font case out or anything. It's free.
Like it's cocky. So
I
like,
did that.
yeah.
You ever have a problem as a publisher or something, even where I am?
I do. You can be my happy.
I just changed the density of my font one time.
Other font or non-font questions. Oh, just her back there.
Is Fagin a name that is known in the community? Is that a made-up Dickens last name? Like, where did that come from?
Yeah. Funny enough, the name Dickens got the name Fagin from a guy he used to work with when he worked in like the boot blacking factory as a child. One of the people who worked in the factory was named Bob Fagin, and he just liked the last name and gave it to the character Fagin in Oliver Twist. And I have to feel like that guy was not thrilled. It is a last name. I don't know that it's a traditionally Jewish last name, but I think he just liked the sound of it.
Any other question?
Yeah, what are some strange details that you found either in your research or brainstorming that you wanted to put in the novel but didn't make the final cut?
Yeah. There's so many of
In
them.
his 900-page.
Yeah, those wacky Victorians, man. I couldn't find a way to make this make sense in the novel. It was so irrelevant, but it's one of my favorite weird Victorian facts, which is the whole Egyptology craze in the Victorian era. You all are my people. That you're all like, yeah, things the Victorians did with mummies. Yeah. Yes. But I couldn't figure out a way to have my characters obtain an Egyptian artifact in any way. But the Victorians were obsessed with mummies and would just like, of course, go out and bring them back to the British Museum, but then also to their home and just keep them in their like curio cabinets.
And they would like grind them up into powder and use that as paint.
sometimes they wouldn't drink it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, I hate to be at quite a while and remember to experience.
So that came up when I was researching, and I was like, should I? Oh, my editor will be so mad at me if she has to tell me to take that out.
This is like what I foresee is somebody could write like a inspired by your book, new book, but it's sort of like Indiana Jones meets Fagin. And he's kind of like breaking into museums, stealing artifacts.
Oh my God. I have to go right now.
They're fan fiction, right? You're fan fiction. Yeah. Yeah.
Fantastic.
Anything.
But this was fan fiction.
Oh, fair. Yeah. So fan fiction of the fan fiction.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Do you have a question?
This being your third book, have you noticed like a trend in the types of characters that you have to learn about and kind of what draws you to that kind of character?
Yeah, I've kind of come to accept that my preferred kind of character is an absolute mess who never makes a good decision in their life. So I sort of embraced that to the max here. But I think the other thing that I notice my characters are trying to figure out a lot is they don't quite belong where they are. And there's that sense of trying to make a place for you in a world that doesn't want you the way that you are. And that's shown up sort of in all of the characters I've written and care about the most. But I don't know what that says about me. Yeah.
It's just kind of fun to look around and see how wide the demographic of this audience is. So I'm curious, did you have a specific demographic in mind when you're writing your books, or was this just kind of a surprise?
This is, I didn't have a demographic in mind. I had a kind of person that I thought would enjoy a book like this. And I've described my ideal reader as English majors, theater nerds, and people who just want to yell at you about the Victorians. And so that not to any of you. There we go. No, but it's really wonderful to find it resonating with people who, similar background for me, different background for me. I think that, it's part of the reason why Dickens has stayed around for so long is there's something in there for everybody, and it's nice to kind of tap into that.
Are there other questions?
Even if you hate him.
I was telling Allison earlier, I used to have a job working at a theater box office. And sometimes people they'd see a play and they wouldn't like it. And they'd say, I want my money back because I didn't like the play. And what we were told to tell them, which I still believe, it's like, well, you didn't pay to enjoy the play. You paid to experience the play. And so I feel like Charles Dickens, whether you think about him or his books, it's like, well, his books are an experience.
Yeah. And I mean, lest it sound like I've been bashing on Dickens for an hour, he's incredible. And I think he's incredibly good at what he does. And there's a reason that they're classics, and there's a reason that I wanted to write a book set in his world. I just wanted to do something slightly different in it. And I've described it as Dickens put together a great sandbox in Oliver Twist. And I'm like, do you mind if I play in here now that you're done? And, there's lots to do.
Actually, I have a question.
Yeah.
Who is your favorite Fagin performer that you've heard or seen in a movie, or there's been mini-series, the musical, obviously? Who's your Fagin of your heart? Who are you picturing when you were writing this book?
I wasn't picturing any of this. Is a very particular person in my head, and I know what he looks like. And so whenever anyone asks me what's your fan cast for Fagin, I'm like, no, it's just it's the guy that I picture. That's who that is. But the adaptation that I liked recently of Fagin, I really liked David Thewlis's Fagin from The Artful Dodger on Disney Plus, which is it's a real popcorn show. It's goofy.
Because that's The Artful Dodger after Oliver Twist is in Australia and is a doctor or something.
It's a wild show. But
Fagin is there in Australia?
He shows up in Australia.
Why not?
Yeah, why not? But there's the way that they play him in that adaptation is the right mix of interesting but a little bit scary. And I found him really, really watchable.
Yeah.
I've been searching a lot for the ideal portrayal of Fagin in an adaptation. I don't know that I've seen one that hits everything I want, but that one got a lot of it.
Okay. Are there other questions? Yeah.
Can you tell us what you're writing about next?
I just had a very nervous email thread with my agent 2 days ago where I'm like, I might be doing this, but I don't know. And she's like, Good luck. You'll figure it out.
You know what?
So,
You know what? No, related to that. Well, because I don't know if you can say what you're writing, but when you first had this project, I remember you told me that you sent this to your agent.
Yeah.
And she's like, "Oh, I didn't know you were a Charles Dickens fan."
Oh, you don't know a lot about me.
And you're like, "That's not why I wrote
That's
this."
not.
But like the response to this book in the first place, I think it took a while for her to understand what you were getting at, and like for you to explain to the editors.
Well, you changed the title of the book, didn't you?
The title was changed. Yeah.
I don't know.
Was
Rotten Hearts?
Yes, that was the second title. I'll tell you the brief title saga if you're curious, because when I sent the manuscript to my editor, the finished draft, it was just called Fagin. That's what I had been calling it. And they, we went through, we did notes, we did edits, and then she took it to the publisher to see what they thought. And the publisher said, well, we're not sure that, modern booksellers and modern readers are going to know who Fagin is. And so we think in the title, we're going to have to give him something more than that. So can you come up with something that's a little bit more vibey? And so I sat I hate titling books. So I took 2 weeks and came up with probably 40 different titles that just had Oliver Twist energy to them. And the one we went with was Our Rotten Hearts, which is from a quote that Nancy says about Bill in Oliver Twist. And that's the one that we announced the book with, and that's the one that we designed the first cover with, and I revealed the first cover to the world. And the week after we revealed the first cover to the world, the sales team sent me an email and said, we actually think this book would sell better if it had Fagin in the title, because we think people really know who Fagin is. And I was like, do you now? So we very quickly went to my very talented, very patient cover designer and said, hey, can you redo exactly what you did, but with a brand new title, and can you have it tomorrow? So we changed midstream, and that sometimes that's publishing, baby.
But it hadn't been printed.
It hadn't been printed. Yeah. It was still early enough that you get kind of a fun trivia fact that some people know what the original title was.
Yeah.
But now and I'm personally very happy with the title we have now, because it's sort of what I was calling it to begin with. So it feels like, okay, this is what I was writing it as.
Well, and I like this Fagin the Thief, because it's like, oh, do I know that person? Oh, that's that character.
That's the one.
Yeah. That's two words.
Excellent title person. You're just writing the wrong genre. Because if you were writing cozy mystery.
Oh, if I was writing cozy mysteries.
She's so good at puns. She's so good at puns.
The best day of my life is when a friend of mine said, I just finished the draft of my cozy mystery and I need a title. And I said, sit down a minute. And I sent her 30 options.
It's your fault.
I know. I can't write mystery, though.
Yeah.
Well, give me a team.
So I hope this isn't too much of a spoiler, but there wasn't really, there's no Fagin romance. And I was wondering if that was a deliberate choice or just it doesn't really fit.
Yeah, it was a deliberate choice, actually. I had that conversation with my team as we were revising. They said, you've written, romances in your previous books. Is it something you're interested in exploring here? And I told them it's not. I don't see that for this character. It wasn't the way that I understood him. I understand him as a person who's very not frightened of intimacy. That's not exactly the right word, because I do think part of it is just he's satisfied with relationships that are not romantic relationships. That's not something that I thought this character was seeking. But there was also the sense of isolation and the sense of the need for belonging was so important for him that introducing a romantic relationship for him felt like a distraction from that, and also like it didn't feel real for that character. So I did think about it and then think that that's not right for him. It doesn't go here.
You got close.
I got close, and then I said no.
Thank you, Allison.
Well, thank you all for coming out.
Yeah.
So I hope you all enjoyed that. I had such a good time hosting that event. It was just, again, it was so cool just to meet Allison and Lana in person and to meet lots of listeners. And it's so great and really, it's just really rewarding for me personally, if I can get vulnerable. Like I record this podcast here sitting in my apartment, and I have so many so many people that like we're mutuals online and stuff, and like we're chatting about the episodes. But like to actually meet listeners face to face is really, it's so rewarding for me to be like, oh, those are real people. Like when I see the statistics of how many people listen to the podcast, I'm like, each one of those is a real person. And it's been so lovely. We've had a couple different meetups last year and this year. There's going to be some more coming up later in 2025. And then hopefully when my book comes out in 2026, I can meet more of you. But anyway, in the meantime, read Allison's book, Fagin the Thief. So good. Such a good book. I don't think we got spoilery in this conversation. If we got spoilery, it's just about Oliver Twist. And like, you've all had time to read that book. I don't think we can spoil that for you. Anyway, regular episode of Vulgar History is coming up on Wednesday. And until then, I don't know. I feel like I should quote Oliver, the musical. So I'll just say, pick a pocket or two and keep your pants on and your tits out. Vulgar History is researched, written, and hosted by Anne Foster. That's me. The editor is Christina Lumagi. Theme music is by the Severn Duo. The Vulgar History show image is by Deborah Wong. Transcripts are written by Aveline Malik. Find transcripts of recent episodes at vulgarhistory.com.
Listening to a podcast should be time well spent, and I promise it will be if you'll give this podcast a try. It's called Something You Should Know. I'm the host, Mike Carruthers, and in every episode, I talk with leading experts on topics I know you will find fascinating. From why people can't keep secrets, what your favorite music says about you, why your pet acts in strange ways, and so much more. Something You Should Know is designed to give you information you can use in your life and give you great intel that you can share with others. I'm told it's a binge-worthy podcast. And with over 1,000 episodes, there's a lot to binge on. Something You Should Know has been ranked in the top of the Apple podcast charts consistently for a long time. I know you're going to like this. I just need to get you to try it. Something You Should Know. It's available wherever you listen to podcasts.
I'm Amy Nicholson, the film critic for the LA Times.
And I'm Paul Scheer, an actor, writer, and director. You might know me from The League, Veep, or my non-eligible for Academy Award role in Twisters.
We love movies, and we come at them from different perspectives.
Yeah, like Amy thinks that, Joe Pesci was miscast in Goodfellas, and I don't.
He's too old. Let's not forget that Paul thinks that Dune 2 is overrated.
It is.
Anyway, despite this, we come together to host Unspooled, a podcast where we talk about good movies, critical hits,
fan favorites, must-sees, and in case you missed them.
We're talking Parasite to Home Alone.
From Grease to The Dark Knight.
We've done deep dives on popcorn flicks. We've talked about why Independence Day deserves a second look.
And we've talked about horror movies, some that you've never even heard of, like Ganja and Hess.
So if you love movies like we do, come along on our cinematic adventure.
Listen to Unspooled wherever you get your podcasts.
And don't forget to hit the follow button.
Hello, I am Kristen Russo.
And I am Jenny Owen Youngs.
We are the hosts of Buffering the Vampire Slayer once more with spoilers, a rewatch podcast covering all 144 episodes of, you guessed it, Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
We are here to humbly invite you to join us for our 5th Buffy prom, which, if you can believe it, we are hosting at the actual Sunnydale High School. That's right. On April 4th and 5th, we will be descending upon the campus of Torrance High School, which was the filming location for Buffy's Sunnydale High, to dance the night away to 90s music in the iconic courtyard, to sip on punch right next to the Sunnydale High fountain, and to nerd out together in our prom best inside of the set of Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
All information and tickets can be found at bufferingcast.com/prom. Come join us.